hobby, we like to talk about how technology trickles down from Summit Fi IEMs down to uh, cheaper ones, maybe mid-Fi, and as things develop, you are able to access much more technologically or technically capable IEMs at lower price points. Case in point would be, for example, Unique Melody's bone conduction drivers. I think they were one of the first to start using it. And now you can find bone conduction drivers in pretty much a lot of mid-Fi or even cheaper IEMs, right? So what I have in mind today is to ask, does technology actually trickle down to budget Fi IEMs? And if it does it make a difference when you're paying something like $25 for the new Pula Arc? Does it make a difference in terms of technicalities or tuning compared to, say, something that was in the market 3 years ago? This is the Pula Arc. This is the Moondrop Chu 2. So the Chu 2 was out in 2023. It was very popular when it came out, sold a lot, and it was my first IEM actually. I owned it for 2 weeks, gave it to my daughter before I upgraded to the Aria 2, but that's another story. So in the 3 years that has gone by, has the technology trickled down, or is this an improvement over something you could buy 3 years ago, right? Both are 10mm single dynamic driver IEMs. So basic stuff, nothing extremely technologically complicated about the way these things have been created. The cables are pretty similar. I wouldn't talk about packaging at all because it just comes in a box with the tips and the cable, and there's no carrying case or pouch on any of them. So basic, right? So let's start with the Chu 2 because in order to try to understand improvements, let's look at how the Chu 2 used to do. So the Chu 2 essentially is a smooth IEM. I would categorize it as something that is very coherent, very smooth. It has a good amount of bass impact and volume. It's more sub-bass focused than the Arc. It's a lot smoother. Vocals are slightly more forward, and I'd say it's more coherent and more musical. Treble is smoother. It is more crisp, and there's more air, but there are certain limitations to what its performance can be, which I will get to shortly. But essentially, that's what you could get about 3 years ago. Very nice coherent tuning, enough bass performance, enough treble forwardness to make it engaging, good amount of treble. But I would say in terms of technicalities, it really wasn't there at all. You don't get a lot of resolution or micro detail or any kind of sound staging or imaging, right? So fast forward 3 years and 2026, what's the Pula Arc like? So the Pula Arc, in terms of the bass presentation, so firstly, it's also pretty much a balanced tune IEM. So sound-wise, there are differences between the two, and I'd say the biggest difference is that the two differences. So the biggest difference would be the treble isn't as emphasized as it is on the Chu 2, so it's a bit more dark, and I'd say probably less fatiguing to listen to. The mids are also a bit more recessed, so vocals are kind of they're not forward or recessed in that sense, but vocals are kind of placed kind of neutral, right? And the bass is a bit more on the mid bass rather than sub bass. What this translates to is that the bass actually has it's tighter, it's a bit more tactile, and it has a bit more mid bass impact than sub bass. Is it more satisfying? I think it depends, because I actually prefer the sub bass from the Chu 2, which is fuller. The Chu 2's bass is fuller, but it doesn't have as much impact or tactility as the Pula Arc has. In terms of technicalities, Um, I'd say it's almost um, non-existent in the Chu 2, maybe. But in terms of technicalities, imaging on the Arc is a bit better. There's better instrument separation, and vocals tend to have their own space more than you would hear on the Chu 2, which tends to have everything kind of bleed into each other. You don't have, it sounds very old school, the Chu 2, like something you hear on the radio, or on a car radio or something, which is, you get to enjoy the music, but you're not going to be able to discern instruments from vocals and all that. They don't have their own space. But the Pula Arc, definitely you can hear the difference. You can hear the placement of each of these instruments as well as the vocals, all right? So let's compare how it performs on some tracks. Let's start with Hotel California, the live version. Classic track, everybody looks at it, everybody uses it until it's pretty stale. But I think if you're looking at something at this level, let's go back to basics and see how it performs. The guitar at the start, it sounds more real. It sounds more natural on the Pula Arc. You can actually make out that it's the plucks and the sound of the attack. It just sounds more crisp, and it sounds more elastic. The Chu 2, you don't get that. The Chu 2 is just smooth. Everything's smoothed out, right? It's just all in there, right? The kick drum, the one that when it comes in, that has a lot more weight and more impact on the arc, because the mid bass emphasis pushes it out a bit more. You can hear it clearer on this. Moving on to Seven Nation Army. Interestingly, the Chu 2 sounds better than the Arc for this song. I'm not really sure why. The Arc's treble can get a bit hot on this. It's an unusual thing because I've already mentioned the Pula's treble tends to be a bit more darker, right? But in this case, for this song, maybe it's the higher frequencies where the tuning makes it more emphasized, but the treble gets a bit more sizzly and hotter on this track. And the drums also don't have the impact that the Chu 2 has, because even though it has mid bass impact, the Chu 2's sub bass focus gives it more weight and more fullness, which makes it more satisfying to listen to. The next classic track that people like to use to test for sound quality would be Bubbles, Yoshi Horikawa. So this is a bit almost amusing for the both of them, because both of them don't image or soundstage very well. The soundstage for both are relatively narrow. But in this case, what was interesting is that the Chu 2 actually imaged slightly better when you're hearing all the ping pong balls bounce and drop. This was the only track basically which allowed me to perceive that the Chu 2 sounds slightly wider. It allowed a bit more space between the sound of the bouncing balls to come through, and you could kind of almost discern where the balls were in each part of your listening, right? Whereas the Arc, in this case, somehow it all just seemed to be focused more in the center than to the sides, and blended in together. So the Chu 2 wins in this case. Next track that I like to use is called The Winner Takes It All by Carla Bruni. This is a very vocal focused track. It allows me to listen for texture and micro nuances in the vocals. And in this case, the Arc is much better. It's better texture. There's more micro detail that comes out from the lip movement, from clicking of the tongue and all that comes out much better. I'm not going to say it's top class, but it's definitely superior to the Chu 2 for this. And the sound is also more full. The Arc is a warmer IEM, so it definitely comes through in a more satisfying way for this track. Okay, the final track that I used to test is called Sky is Crying by Zhu and Yuna. So this is very interesting because I started with the Chu 2, and towards the end of the song, I heard some effect going click, 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 and I was wondering, okay, fine. And they were like fading it out, When I switched to the Arc, I realized also the cymbals, right? The cymbals are very obvious and very clear in the Arc, but when it came to the Chu 2, it somehow it 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 became more like a sound effect. It was just a very tight, very short, without any definition at all in it. So again, the Pula Arc is definitely a winner in this case, compared to the Chu 2. So as a conclusion, I'd say definitely yes. Over the last 3 years, there has definitely been improvement, and it has definitely trickled down to budget 5. If you own the Chu 2 from a few years ago, might be worth upgrading now to the Arc. It's definitely a superior IEM. Certain areas it might be slightly, it might lose out slightly compared to the Chu 2, but overall, I would say it's a much better experience. If you're looking for something that is more resolving, something that has allows you to perceive instruments and vocals separately, compared to just being something that is pure background listening. I would say the Chu 2, it's time for it to retire. For now, the Pula Arc is definitely the superior IEM, and yes, it has improved in the budget 5 segment.